everybody for joining us today. This is really exciting to me because this is one of our very first member events since I've started as the director of the Cincinnati 2030 District. So it's really exciting to see all of your faces here today, and this is just a wonderful opportunity to learn a little bit from some of the other districts. So today we have Chris Cieslack, and she is the new, as of 5 weeks ago, Pittsburgh 2030 District Director, Executive Director, right? In your case?
Senior Director.
Senior Director. And so Chris was the Senior Director for the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, which is a Carnegie building, went into a Carnegie building and actually achieved LEED Gold. So I thought we'd take this opportunity, since we actually have so many museum members. We have 3 major museum members, and I've invited some of the other local museums to join us today. Thank you for joining, Whitney. And so we thought we'd take this opportunity to kind of talk about what it means to go through this process with an older building, a historic building, and in bringing it into these an energy efficiency, well-oiled machine, while you're dealing with all of the incredible intricacies of a museum. So I thought we'd have a great opportunity to hear Chris's case study. And then also, we welcome everybody to ask questions. And we'll take questions at the end, but please feel free, if you want to get some questions out there, you can put them in the chat box along the way. So, and I'm here with Tom Schultz as well. And I'm just delighted to see you guys. So I'll send it over to you, Chris. Go ahead.
Great. I am going to try to get this up to share, and so just please bear with me because I am a little bit new to presenting from Zoom. And what I want to know is, can you see the hi, and is it showing notes or not?
It is showing your notes.
Okay, so let's figure out how to swap. How does that look?
Perfect.
Great, okay, good. And I will also caveat my presentation with the fact that I have 2 dogs, and if I close them outside of my office, they will bark and paw at the office until I let them in. So they are in the office, and we just have to cross our fingers and hope that nothing disturbs them, because they will start barking and at whatever mailman comes to the door, et cetera, et cetera. So I apologize in advance, but I'm sure everyone's dealing with that right now as well. So we'll just go ahead and get started. As Elizabeth mentioned, I am the former project director for the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and the former senior director of facilities and special projects. I left the museum in March and joined the Green Building Alliance in June as the senior director of the 2030 district and as the vice president of program strategy and impact. Our museum is closed for the foreseeable future because of COVID, so I definitely would love to hear at the end of the presentation some of the experiences from the other museum operators in the room. It's been, it's been really sad. So, and I miss the building, I miss it a lot, so I'm really happy to give this presentation and kind of go back into the photographs of the building and the project, and, just warms my heart. We are going to learn about the transformation of the Carnegie Free Library of Pittsburgh into MuseumLab, and it is a beautiful ruin, and you'll see as we get through this. So a little bit of history about the Children's Museum. The Children's Museum began as a project of the Junior League of Western Pennsylvania in 1983 in the basement of a historic post office building. And if you can see my cursor, the old post office building is this building on the left with the copper dome. By 2004, the museum was faced with the choice of abandoning its urban roots for a more suburban location located with ample parking, easy to get to outside of the city. But we evaluated whether or not we wanted to do that or invest in the community. And what guided our decision was revisiting the mission statement. So the mission statement of the Children's Museum is to provide innovative museum experiences that inspire joy, creativity, and curiosity. But it also includes a statement that we are a partner and a resource for people who work with or on behalf of children, youth, and families. And our vision is to transform education through innovative museum experiences. So upon revisiting the mission statement and the vision, we decided to stay and invest in the community by expanding the museum to encompass a historic planetarium, which was right next door. So that's this other historic building right here with a different dome. This is the planetarium dome. And in 2004, our architect developed a way to join the two buildings together with a brand new building called the Lantern Building, and that's the building that's right in between the two buildings. That serves as our lobby, and it's a 3-story building with some new exhibits in it. It's really cool. So we like to say we have 3 centuries of architecture here in a row because the post office was built in the 1800s, the planetarium was built in the early 1900s, and the Lantern Building was built in 2004. We have a strong commitment to good design principles. The Children's Museum is committed to quality design and firmly believes that our attention to aesthetics and practicality creates functional, welcoming community spaces. This philosophy guided our 2004 expansion and the development of our exhibits, and it's the basis for all of our future work. Our philosophy is that we play with real stuff. We want students of all ages encouraged to find their own answers through hands-on exploration in art and science. They learn, create, and play with real things and real processes that are concrete, relevant, and fun. So we developed Make Shop, Art Studio, and several partnerships with local schools and universities in order to study the impact of our programs on learning. We wanted to do more, increase impact, and create the largest cultural campus for children. So by 2016, we were seeing over 300,000 visitors a year. We were also continuing our mission to transform education through innovative museum experiences. But by now, we felt we needed to reach a greater audience and we needed more space to do that. At the same time, we continued to think about how to reinvent and rethink education by formal and informal examples of experimentation. We turned toward an adjacent, empty, and neglected building, an old library, to see whether we could turn it into an opportunity. Thus was born MuseumLab. We wanted to lead older children to the edge of critical thinking through learning engagement with beautiful, troubling, and curious elements of society. All right, I'll pause here. You all can see the historic building. I just want to touch base and make sure my audio is still working.
Yes.
Great. Okay. The library was built in 1890 with a generous donation from steel magnate and industrialist Andrew Carnegie. It was one of the first Carnegie Free Libraries in the U.S. and was nominated to the National Register of Historic Places in the 1970s. The city owns it, even though the library occupied it. The city renovated it in 1974, but they just did a terrible renovation. So basically what was going on in the 60s and 70s is there was a lot of urban renewal in the area, and many of the historic buildings were being demolished. So there was kind of this march northward from the downtown area towards the north side to take these buildings down and to, reimagine them with 1960s urban architecture. And really the community kind of got to the point where they said, stop, don't do anything, don't do any more demolition. And so the 3 buildings, so I showed you the old post office building, the planetarium, and this library, they're all kind of in a row along an old street that used to be there. And that was basically where the demolition stopped. But the cost of maintaining this library was huge, even back in the 70s. So the city renovated it, but rather than do a sensitive renovation, they pretty much just covered everything up on the inside. So there were a lot of drop ceilings, a lot of bulkheads, a lot of wallpaper, a lot of awful flooring just over the old flooring. So that's what we had to deal with. They just covered all the interior ornamentation. By 2006, The library system was distressed with the ongoing cost of the operation and maintenance. And really, we're looking for a way to get out of this big building. It's 50,000 square feet. It was bigger than their operating model could handle. They really were moving towards a small regional branch type system of libraries. So they were trying to figure out a way to get out of this lease when the hand of God came down and struck the bell tower with lightning and knocked that finial off of the top of it. So you can see the picture on the right, the finial has been knocked off. It crashed through the slate roof. You can see this here, and it crashed the Steinway grand piano. Luckily, it happened in the middle of the night. Nobody was hurt. But the library system took that as a sign from God, and they vacated the building. They closed it to the public. They used that opportunity to raise the funds to build a small regional branch up the street. And the library then sat vacant at that point from 2006 on. So it happens to be right next to the existing Children's Museum, so we continued to keep our eye on it, and eventually we came up with the idea of expanding our Museum Lab into it. And our vision for Museum Lab was to develop a more curious, connected, empathetic, and courageous citizenry. We wanted to create a space for a big experiment, an opportunity to overlap formal education with a non-traditional learning environment. In this case, we wanted to create an ambitious project that catered to children ages 10 and up. So our existing museum tended to cater towards a younger age group, although we do say that we're available for ages 0 to 99, but generally as a children's museum, it did focus on the younger kids. So Museum Lab wanted to look at ages 10 and up and kind of, find that niche. We wanted a pathway to access technology, tools, and talent. So we created the idea that we would have studios for art, technology, and fabrication. In order to make the business plan work, because the building is so big, at 50,000 square feet, we really only needed the first floor, which is about 12,000 square feet. So in order to make our business plan work, we created a partnership with Manchester Academic Charter School. And they're a charter middle school that's located in the north side. They were leasing a building, and they also wanted to expand. So rather than continue to lease their building that was too small, they entered into a partnership with the Children's Museum to take the second floor, which is about 15,000 square feet for them. It's been fabulous for both partners. For Museum Lab, the charter school livens up the space because during the day they're conducting their programs within the museum, within the museum amenities. And that's usually our slowest time when kids are at school. So we've got a nice middle school that energizes and activates the space and sort of the captive audience, and then they get the advantage of using all of our exhibits and our tools and our resources. All right, so to kind of dig into a little bit about sustainability, which was where I had the most impact, we started by building an amazing team. It was based on trust and past experience, but also we took the risk with adding new partners. So we combined 2 architects. We had an architect in California, Koenig Eisenberg out of Santa Monica. They had done our Lantern building renovation in 2004. So our executive director and that architect, her name is Julie Eisenberg, they had a long history of proven success. So there was a high degree of trust between the 2 of them. But we also needed a local architect of record that could take the vision and then transform it into something we could build in Pittsburgh and navigate through all of the city permitting process. So that was our team, and it included, of course, all the engineers and consultants that you would have, but it also included a sustainability consultant. So we started with our sustainability charrette, and honestly, I'll say that to some degree, I had LEED fatigue. I've done a number of LEED certified buildings, and I've been through sustainability charrettes, and after a while, everyone at the team kind of knows how to make a LEED building, and so it started to get a little bit like, let's just move on and start designing and start building. But I'm really glad that we did it because as I expected that we would make a commitment to LEED Gold, we ended up coming out with very different goals that I wouldn't have expected. So the goals that we wanted to keep in mind were that we wanted the project to be visible, dynamic, open, and nurturing. And all of this ties back to the vision to develop a more curious, connected, empathetic, and courageous citizenry. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we meant by visible, dynamic, open, and nurturing, because otherwise it just sounds like jargon and it doesn't have meaning. But you'll see, when I take you on a tour of the building, you'll see how that guided our design. So by being visible, we wanted to be a beacon to the community. We wanted to be authentic and visible to visitors. So you'll see that because we made all of our energy and our building systems visible. They're not hidden behind walls. They're not covered up. We also wanted to be when we wanted to be a beacon to the community, we wanted to participate in well-known, established third-party rating systems like 2030, like LEED, like Well Building. So those were the guidelines we adopted because they're nationally or globally recognized. We wanted to be dynamic, and that means encouraging activity in the space, connecting the spaces, letting the spaces be adjustable, give occupants control of the spaces, allow for the creation and flexibility of the spaces, and then have an energy system that was responsible to that flexibility, that dynamism. We wanted to be open, so we wanted to break down walls. We wanted to, we really wanted to have the opportunity to break down barriers between people and help them have different perspectives. Because of the charter school and the fact that we're trying to educate middle school kids, that was important to us, that we were able to provide opportunities to change perspectives. To celebrate art and history, and to celebrate diversity, and to bring the outside in with art, nature, and light. And finally, we wanted to be nurturing. We wanted the spaces to be safe, warm, home-like spaces that utilize natural light, encouraged vulnerability and risk-taking, and were healthy. So, I think everyone wants that, right? But it's hard to know how design responds to that. All right, so we adopted several systems to guide us. LEED, I mentioned, 2030 Challenge, the Well Building. We also adopted a pilot program out of University of Buffalo called Universal Design, and we were able to achieve universal design as well. We commissioned an energy model, and I would say we really exercised the energy model. So we ran this through a number of iterations and found that it was, we had always intended to replace the windows because they were from 1970. We always intended to replace the lighting and the mechanical systems because they were, again, from 1970. We had to replace the roof because it was leaking, so that was easy to insulate. But then, that still wasn't getting us where we wanted to go, and the 2030 district members really pushed us. They kept drilling into us, 50% reduction, 50% reduction. If you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're not going to renovate this building again between now and 2030. And so if you don't do it now, you're going to miss the goals. You're going to miss the deadlines. So we kept running the energy model with different scenarios and eventually came to the conclusion that we needed to insulate the walls. And that was difficult because it was a historic building. So we did not want to insulate the exterior, so we ended up finding a product that we could use on the interior, and I'll show you that when we get into the inside. So the goals, of course, 50% reduction. We started with a baseline EUI of 156, and at the end of the first year of performance, our EUI was 54.5, which, I just am still stunned that happened because the energy model predicted we would get it down to about a 65 EUI. I honestly thought that was optimistic. I really didn't think that, I thought that was just on paper and that we wouldn't really get there. And then on top of all of that, the first summer that we were open, we kept the front doors open all summer because we'd been under construction for 2 years, and so nobody really knew we were open to the public. So we had, you know, balloons and you know, signage, and, you know, the doors were open, and we'd have the security guard like, come on in, we're open. So that was open all summer, and we still got a 54.5 EUI. So I'm shocked, and I'm sure it'll be lower this year because of COVID. But all right, so this is what we had to deal with. You can see the picture on the left is what it looked like in the 70s. The, you know, low lighting, and the all the ornamentation was kind of boxed over and covered up. The beautiful floor tile was covered up with a quarry tile. So our hope was to reinstate the quality of the historic building that had been hidden by the 1960s renovation. We expected to find the historic architecture below, but some of it, not all of it. But what we found was quite damaged. So you can see where, rather than just cover everything over, the 1970s renovation destroyed some of the beautiful orientation. So we had to figure out, you know, what to do. How were we going to handle this? Were we going to try to restore it to its original beauty? That would have been cost prohibitive, and it also would not have been authentic to our personality. So this is what we did. And this is the period in the presentation where the live audience goes, ooh, ah. So if someone could do that, that would be great. There we go. Okay, good. We stripped back the columns to reach a stable surface below the crumbling plaster and the capitals. And what we found were the building's structural underpinnings. We felt they were poetic and a fitting backdrop for the program that looked at how things are made. So we embraced the idea of a beautiful ruin. We try to incorporate a lot of the building materials back into the building. So if you see behind the staircase there, or behind the reception desk, is a perforated steel screen. That actually was the steel flooring from the stacks. So it is from about 1910, and it has this beautiful patina on it. And if you look closely, it has, you know, some cracks and chips in the edges of the panels. But we thought it had a really nice biophilic pattern. It dapples the sunlight on the walls behind it, and it creates this beautiful screen. This staircase had been removed in the 70s, so we reintroduced it as a modern element. But again, it was to encourage activity and a change of perspective, and you know, so it went with our goals. We have also collected a lot of art and commissioned site-specific installations. So this is a chandelier that's hanging from the ceiling. And it's made out of paper mache. It was pretty painstaking. If you have questions about it, I can answer them offline. These photos show the original central gathering space. If you note in this center picture right here, there is an original leaded glass ceiling. This was removed in the 70s. And then this is the picture on the left is the 1970s renovation. So there was still a skylight, but there was no leaded glass ceiling. And the colonnades that surrounded the room, as well as the fireplace, were completely covered over. So that we had a bulkhead that covered over that colonnade. The blue wallpaper here is actually acoustic carpeting. So it was real 1970s style carpeting. And then the fireplace just, you know, was removed and disappeared. So during the renovation, we took the bulkhead down and we found the colonnade was still there. And in fact, we found some oil paintings. About 5 of them were hidden behind the wall. So we removed those and put them into storage for preservation. So now this is what it looks like today. Ooh, ah. So what we did is we commissioned an installation to evoke the memory of the Tiffany Skylight. The ceiling, colorful ceiling structure that you see is actually laser cut fabric that lets the light through and lets the sprinkler water through too, but that's a whole other story. An argument we had with the building permit department, but it does let the sprinkler water through if there's a fire. And as you can see on the back wall, we have the ghost of the old fireplace. So we took the steel panels from the stacks and we made a fireplace out of them, and then we backlit the fireplace with LED lighting that evokes that warmth and that flicker. As far as sustainable project features, we balanced the hazardous materials with the historic preservation by encapsulating the archaeological discoveries in a clear coat sealer. So you could imagine that some of the paint over time was lead-based paint. So we had to, we had to protect the workers to remove the lead-based paint and then encapsulate what was left with a clear coat so that it doesn't continue to degrade and infiltrate the air. This is our studio lab, which is a place for interactive art installations. We'll bring visiting artists in to teach their art means and methods to our visitors. With as we went through the building, each reveal required us to reassess whether or not we would preserve it or restore it. And in some cases, it made sense to restore rather than to preserve. So I talked a little bit before about the need to insulate the walls in order to achieve the energy efficiency that we wanted to achieve. So one of the ways to do that was to basically put in a thermal plaster product. So I was an owner. So as an owner, I was really concerned about this, the crown molding at the top of this room and making sure that we didn't cover it up. And I was also concerned about the window depth and the sight lines through the window, and I didn't want to wrap the insulation so thickly around the windows or so thickly around the crown molding that it concealed that or that it sort of took away from that. So our architectural team did some research and found a thermoplaster product out of Italy that goes on about 1 inch thick. It's made out of ground up cork and clay products. And it ends up matching the original plaster finish of the historic building really well. So because we were going to insulate the interior of the exterior walls, and this room had 3 exterior walls, we decided that this room would be a restoration room as opposed to a preserve room. But we have a cut line here, so it was very deliberate where we preserved it versus where we restored it versus where we preserved it. Okay. Here's just some more pictures of our studio lab with our artists in residence. Lots of light. This is looking back through the Grayble Gallery, which is the main gathering space. And again, we wanted generous circulation paths for universal design. So that was relatively easy to do. It was, the original bones of the building had generous circulation paths. So just by taking the walls down and unwrapping the columns with their faux wrap that they had in 1974, we were able to meet that requirement really easily. We left a lot of the holes from the 1970s renovation. These little nooks and crannies became opportunities for our guests to curate small oddities and artwork. So that's always fun. Just another view. We have one of our exhibits is called Tech Lab, and it's a technology laboratory that we developed in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University's Entertainment Technology Center. So this is a place where, you can see in the picture, they're doing some virtual, I think it's virtual reality or artificial reality work. This is our Make Lab. In the existing Children's Museum, we have a Make Shop, which is a space for making for little kids. The Make Lab is geared towards older kids, so it's more dangerous and more sophisticated. So you have to be, chaperoned while you're in here, and you can see our teaching artists are working with young children. This group is a little younger than our ideal audience, but we are still able to work with them. You can note this original steel beams. These are Carnegie steel. so we preserved those. And then we talked to the library system about donating old furniture because it used to be a library and we feel they owed us. So they donated some old card catalogs, which are great for a Make Lab. This is it at work. One of the things that wasn't open before COVID hit was the stacks. So hopefully this will be coming next year when we reopen. We preserved the stacks, but the stacks, of course, were miles and miles and miles of bookshelves, and we didn't need bookshelves. So we commissioned an art installation by a Slovenian artist named Mansa, and she has combined an architecture degree with lace making, which is part of her cultural heritage. And she has woven a climbing structure out of hemp, all using the structural stacks as the structure that supports the climbing structure. She's been working on it for about a year, and then she got slowed down because of COVID. But this should be finished while we're closed for COVID, and then hopefully we'll be able to open it when we reopen the museum. But it's really cool. You got to come see it. That's all I got to say. A key design strategy was to reintroduce light into the building. So this was the old skylight. So we replaced the skylight. We created a room here, and we have introduced new skylights. You'll see in the next couple of pictures. So now we're on the second floor, and we're moving up to the charter school. So all of this was covered up. The window on the right was covered over. There was a bathroom in front of it. All the flooring was covered over with a quarry tile. The ceiling was dropped, down. You can actually see the line of the old ceiling, this blue line right here. That's how low the ceiling was. So all of the work above it was hidden. So we revealed that all. This is the second floor gathering space, which is essentially the entry to the charter school. And this is where the skylight used to be. So we demolished the old skylight. We put in new clerestory up above, and we put in glass flooring so that the light could filter down to the floor below. We did, our architect was so clever, so we knew we would always have seating out here. So in order to she made the seating part of the artwork. So we've got hooks here on the existing walls, and when the kids are finished with their assembly or their lunch, they just fold up the chairs and hang them on the wall. So we don't have those ugly chair carts, always sitting around. It's all part of the artwork. I thought that was so clever and functional. Lots of art. And then this is the school. So this is the charter school and their library space. Lots of light. This ended up being a restoration area as opposed to a preserve area because we felt that the charter school really, it seemed like they wanted a space that felt newer and restored as opposed to ruined. And we wanted to respect their request that they wanted something that was not ruined as much as it was downstairs. A number of the sustainable project features, all in the idea of supporting mindfulness and healthy cognitive function. We have over 30% outside air, so we have an outside air delivery system. We had dimmable lighting to reduce the glare at the work surfaces. We had walk-off mats and MERV 13 air filters in the system. Everything was low VOC, and we performed water quality testing to ensure low contaminant levels. So a lot of the things you see in most projects, we did. And then this is our assembly hall. So this room was also, we had planned to do thermal plaster on the exterior walls to improve the insulation. But this was a case where our energy model was really, really helpful. So every time I would give a tour, my wedding planner and my event planner manager would come in and she would plead with me to leave the bricks. She says, please, please, please leave the bricks. It's going to be so much more fun to rent with the bricks than if you cover it with plaster and paint it white. Then it'll look like every other venue space, event space in the city, and it won't be special. And I kept arguing with her because I said, you know, we need energy efficiency, it's got to get thermal plaster, blah, blah, blah. But she kept begging me. So finally I went back to the energy modeler and I said, just run the model with this one room uninsulated and tell me what I get. And it was like a negligible, it was like barely one EUI. So it was easy at that point. And I was like, okay, I won't plaster this building, this one room. And it was great. I mean, it's a beautiful room and it has a lot of character, and we were able to rent it out quite a bit. And then on the last day of major construction, the very last thing we were planning to do was install the front door because we didn't want it to get ruined. And as we were pulling away the existing wainscot, we found this beautiful terracotta archway. It had not been seen in any of the historic photos, so I did not know it was there. It was just beautiful. And because we had an open mind, we were able to celebrate this discovery, but it did set us back about 2 months in redesign and construction. But this is what it looks like up close. So it was really cool. So that's basically it. So I'm going to stop and see if there are questions.
Everybody can feel free to unmute yourself and share your camera if you'd like and ask questions of Chris, please.
Yes, hi, Chris. This is Chuck Laurie. I'm working with the CAC here in Cincinnati. I was wondering how you dealt with air sealing and the how tightness of the envelope for the building.
Right. So, you know, the major infiltration point, well, I will say we did not do a blower air door test. We thought about it, but the building is just enormous, and we, you know, we felt like we just needed to do our best to seal it and not do a blower door test. Obviously, all the windows were replaced, so that went a long way in sealing it up. The biggest loss of air was through that bell tower. And, you know, the city was paying $150,000 a year to heat and cool an empty building, or basically to heat an empty building to keep the pipes from freezing. And it was mostly just going right out that bell tower because it was all wide open. So we sealed that up. We replaced the door and put the seal, you know, seals on the door, and that made a huge difference. And then, you know, all the other interior walls were insulated with the thermal plaster, and all the, you know, all the entry points were replaced. So new front doors, new back doors, new loading dock doors. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It's I've just learned from energy models that the tightness of the building can have a huge effect on your model.
Mm-hmm. We also repointed the outside. So that was what was interesting, is you could see, and we didn't repoint the entire granite facade, but we could see where we were getting infiltration because you could see the water damage inside. So we repointed as much as we could. There is still, after we moved in and started operating, I noticed other areas that were not repointed, so we have to go back and do that.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to be driving by you early September. I want to stop by and tour it.
Oh yeah, give me a call.
Thank you.
Yeah, I should mention that Chuck is with the Contemporary Art Center, who's helping them with their energy modeling and working on their efficiencies.
Great.
Well, I have a couple questions. I'm interested in a little bit more about the lighting. You know, I'm assuming most of the lighting was LED, but there's a lot of like specialty lighting. What sort of, you know, did those affect the energy consumption very much, or how was that managed?
Well, it's all LED. It's all LED, and it's on a lighting control system. And everywhere, I mean, and I think this is part of the code, everywhere we had occupancy or vacancy sensors. So my understanding, and I'd have to go back to the model, but I think lighting is a very small percentage of the overall energy consumption. I think our big energy use is the air conditioning and the heating. And our heating is our heating and our cooling are district energy. So we get chilled water and steam that comes from a plant about a mile away, half a mile away.
Oh, good.
So we have no natural gas in the building. It's all electric or district chilled water and steam that comes to the building.
Hey, this is Carl Sterner. A couple questions for you. First one, for the presentation, very good, inspiring work. One is kind of a very detailed question. I was just curious what type of insulation you ended up with for the roof.
Yes, we went with as high as we could. I can definitely follow up with you on that. So this was interesting. We had flat roofs and slate roofs. So with the flat roofs, we went, I wish I could remember, we went as thick as we possibly could without like basically topping over the parapet, because we knew it was a once in a lifetime chance to do that. And then all the slate roofs, we did spray foam insulation on the underside of the slate, which I was really nervous about, because the slate is applied directly to the purlins with little copper wires. There's no substrate underneath it. And when you would get up in the attic and look, you could see the pinholes in the slate. So the slate's 120 years old, and I think it would have been cost prohibitive to replace the slate. I don't know how we would have done it, but we did the spray foam up underneath it, and my architectural team assured me that I would not have to worry about dew points and delamination. And I mean, it obviously worked with our energy model, and I haven't seen any problems with moisture. So I guess they were right.
Yeah. And then my other question was, you had mentioned the 2030 district and kind of getting feedback from them. I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on their involvement, and was the museum already a member of the district going into this?
Yeah, so the last renovation in 2004 was a LEED Silver renovation, and my predecessor at the museum had committed us to the 2030 partnership, which our district included the north side, so it made sense that they would have signed us up. So we were already committed, and we were already doing the annual reporting of Energy Star Portfolio Manager and the one-on-one consultations with GDA. And then when I came on board, I tagged along with the facilities team to the one-on-ones, because they knew that we were doing this renovation next door, and I knew I was, obviously. And so they had a whole lot of questions for us, like, well, how are you going to do it? And what are you going to do? And this is a great opportunity. And in the beginning, I was like, well, we're just going to do a LEED building, and that's energy efficient. And, I didn't know a lot about it, but then they started to, basically tell me more about it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. It's 50% reduction by 2030. Like, you can hold that in your head very easily. And so when I told our executive director that, oh, we're going to do LEED and we're going to do well building, but also we're going to comply with the 2030 challenge, when she would go into meetings with the mayor or the county executive and she'd say that, they just knew exactly what that was. They were impressed, because they knew it was harder than just LEED. They knew it was like, raising the bar, but it was just very easy to say. Like, it wasn't, you didn't have to explain it. People understood it. So that really was helpful. And then, there were a couple times, like I had to make decisions about whether or not to divest from district energy and put in standalone systems. My engineer was over here like, district energy is a scam, and over here, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't have any real estate to build my own central plant. And so then I called the GBA and I said, I'm getting like chatter from my consultants that's not making a lot of sense. Can you be an honest broker with me and help me understand this? And so she's like, no, district energy, you know, you already have district energy. Most people would kill to have district energy. Stay on it. It's going to cost you a ton more in upfront capital to switch off of district energy and go to standalone. So don't do that. And yeah, she was great. And, you know, every time I started to lose my nerve, I would call up Angelica. I don't know if you guys know her, but and she was a friend of mine too. I'd call up Angelica. I don't know how I'm going to sell $400,000 in insulation to the board. And she'd talk me off the ledge, and she'd say, the only time you have to do it, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. It really worked. And then when I went to the board president, and I said, you know, like, it's always hard to get into return on investment because it's always a little fuzzy. And but he basically, his answer was, it's easier to fundraise for a great building than a good enough building. And that was music to my ears. I mean, not that we went out and then went hog wild with things. I kind of wish we had, but you know, he basically said, I can sell that. Like I can use that to fundraise. When I say 2030 district, and when I say, you know, insulation, people will get that and they understand it. And the money came.
That's great feedback. I like that quote. I may use that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Feel free.
Hi, this is David Owen. I've got a question about, you had mentioned, I believe, universal design, kind of a pilot program out of, was it Buffalo?
Yep.
How did that shape the design process, and what did that add to the whole project?
So luckily, I mean, what I will say about the SUNY Buffalo people is that they were extremely helpful, and it was more like an education process than it was a test. So they came in, like I would, first of all, it costs hardly anything. So, I mean, I highly encourage anyone to sign them up because they bill you for the hour, and then they just basically review your plans and give you advice. And it just didn't cost much money at all. And then what they would do, because they had this really long checklist, and frankly, the checklist was staggeringly complicated. And so I finally just gave my drawings to the lady at Buffalo, and I said, can you review it and tell me if I meet the checklist? And she did, because she wrote the checklist, so she knew it. So essentially, well, the one thing that we added that I would say we might not have thought to add was we added an adult changing table. And so we have one, and there's not that many public adult changing tables in the city. I think there's 3 total. I don't even think it's ever been used, but the idea that we can offer that to autistic children or adult, you know, we obviously do a lot of historic building tours. Having an adult changing table is a nice thing to be able to say. But beyond that, they just evaluated our signage package to make sure the font was readable, that the signs were placed in areas that, you know, that made sense for sight lines and all of those types of things. It was easy for us to achieve the circulation patterns. Like, we didn't have any issues with that at all because the building was just naturally very open. So that was really easy. They caught a few locations where our entry points were a little narrow. Like there were a couple areas where we were trying to create new circulation paths, and the bones of the building didn't let you make the door very wide, and then that meant that we had to add the push button automatic door openers, which sadly we found about that later, and so then it was added cost, so I wasn't happy about that. But does that answer your question?
Yes, I just kind of wanted to see, I mean, it's really more about like visual signage and entry points and whatnot. It really is not it's not really connected to like lead or well or anything like that. Is that correct?
It's not, although there are some similarities. It almost looks like they were that they got their idea for their system from lead and well, because it's structured very similarly. And there is a little bit of overlap, probably more with well than with lead. There is also a whole host of operational policies and operational elements to it. Like, do you have closed captioning? Do you have, an accessible website? Do you have, noise canceling headphones for people with sensory disorders? Like, there's a whole element to that as well that I didn't get too far into the weeds with because I was the buildings person. So they walked us through our paces with that too. But if you reach out after, I can put you in touch with Buffalo and with the website, because it was pretty interesting. But it's like it's ADA, but more. It takes it up further. Are there any other questions in the chat?
I have a question. This is Whitney, and I work with our education and exhibit teams, so more interested in what is done with the building now that it's so beautiful, and hopefully will be open again soon. Is the intent for the public part of it, the first floor? It looked like there were a lot of great facilitated experiences for the age range that it serves. Are there also exhibit galleries in the way that there are some exhibit galleries in the Children's Museum, which I've been to and which is one of my very favorite?
Everything in MuseumLab is hands-on. So it's all, there's a difference between whether or not it is, self-guided or programs. So Tech Lab is, well, I think MakeLab and Studio Lab are much more programmed. MakeLab is heavily programmed. Studio Lab is, if there's ever a problem with getting staff, Studio Lab would usually be the one that would be self-guided. Tech Lab can be self-guided, but we usually would have one person in there because the technology was sometimes a little bit difficult to operate if you didn't know what you were doing. And then Grayble Gallery was unstaffed. So Grayble Gallery became the completely self-guided. And we would have, like, at one point, we had a Fred Rogers exhibit because of Mr. Rogers' anniversary. And so we had a piano in there, and, we had, you could just play the piano. You could play Mr. Rogers' neighborhood songs, whatever. But that was that area with the 2 couches and the beautiful ceiling and the fireplace. And that's really meant to be like the hub, the gathering space, the place where you run into people or wait for your family. And we would have like vintage games that you could play and artwork that you could look at. So.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. What museum are you with?
With Cincinnati Museum Center, and so we're a Museum of Natural History and Science, History Museum, and Children's Museum, all in Union Terminal, which is a 1930s Art Deco train terminal that just finished an extensive 2.5-year renovation. And actually today is today's our first day back open to our members, so learning a lot.
Yeah, who all has opened back up?
I'm actually with the airport, so we never closed. So it's been interesting, but we are lucky enough to have a lot of the museum center exhibits. We have, throughout the airport, which, I still, whenever I'm walking through the terminal, masks, everything, people are still very excited to see. So this is where it's very interesting to us, because while we are an airport, we have large spaces. We work with the Cincinnati Museum Center to be able to showcase some of their products as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. Our airport does that too.
Nice. I say hi to our Mastodon every time I go through.
It's fantastic.
The CAC, the Contemporary Art Center in Cincinnati, opened up July 6th with limited capacity in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Amy Burke with the Cincinnati Art Museum said that they opened on June 18th. So they've been open.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
So this is Sarah. I'm with the Taft Museum of Art here in Cincinnati, and today is really exciting because this is our opening day to members, and it's our permanent collection that we're open. We've got about 100 reservations, so it's going pretty well so far.
That's great. Do you have much hands-on or interactive with your visitors?
No, we don't have a lot of touch points, so it's a little bit easier for us to do something like that because it's in an art gallery.
Yeah.
This is Whitney from CMC. We have a lot of hands-on. We're not reopening our children's museum. Like CMP I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but just couldn't figure out a good way to do it with all the restrictions in place. Our Science Interactives gallery in the Museum of Natural History and Science is closed, as is the Cave, which is a totally immersive, like, cave experience. Again, just too many surfaces.
The Carnegie Science Center, which is not affiliated with Children's Museum, did open about a week ago. I haven't heard how that's gone or whether they've decided to close back up. I was surprised, actually. But yeah, we've been struggling with trying to figure out how, not struggling, I mean, it's just that you have to work at it, but how do we reimagine our programs to be less hands-on and, more separate? And then I think our director sort of said, we're going to be closed, let's take this opportunity to refresh some areas. So although MuseumLab is all new and just was done, the existing museum, the last renovation was about 16 years ago, so it could use a little bit of tender love and care. So I think we were going to take that time to do that.
I was wondering if you could talk about how the space is conditioned and like what level do you have, like a building automation systems and things that would help with the temperature controls, humidity controls in each space and the nuances of that, maybe even like what issues maybe came up along the process.
Sure, we have a Johnson Controls Metasys building automation system. It's a Cadillac of building control systems. I will say it's probably more sophisticated than our facilities team was really ready for. So there was a learning curve. But it's still pretty cool. I mean, it's all, web-based and you can control it from home. We have an outside air system, what's it called? And DOS, on-demand distributed outside air system. So every room has a CO2 monitor, and when the CO2 monitor gets over 800 parts per million, it kicks on the outside air, which, obviously then delivers more outside air until it's comfortable. And then we had an energy recovery system because the DOAS was an energy hog. So we had an energy recovery system to kind of bring the energy level back down. All of that's a little bit Greek to me, but I do know that we have it and we had to have it, and it was very expensive. But in order to keep the energy to the level we wanted, there was no other way to do it. We do not, obviously with thermostats, we have, everyone's allowed to control their thermostat. So, we really wanted occupant control, but people just don't. It's funny. Sometimes some people, you could put a fake thermostat and they feel like, oh, they have control. And then other people, they actually really have control, but they don't believe that it's working. So as a facilities person, I would get calls like, I'm too cold. And I'm like, well, did you turn your thermostat up? And they just would say, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I could do it for you remotely, but you could also just go over there and turn it on the wall. So that was funny. We have a few cold spots in the building that were just historically cold. So luckily, my building controls engineer was able to help me like set some rooms outside of the set point. So we kept our band really pretty tight, from like 68 to 72, because I wanted to keep the energy efficiency tight. But then as I had some people that were chronic complainers, I opened up their band a little bit wider so that, you know, because it needs to be comfortable for them. Otherwise, what's the point? The other thing that we found that I didn't realize that in the beginning was, you know, we get our steam and our chilled water delivered to the building. You actually can turn the steam off in the summer. Like you can just crank the whole big pipe to your building down, and then the utility company will zero out your bill. So even though they're sending you steam, if you cut it off at the entry point and, you know, and don't use it, which you don't need it in the summer at all, they'll zero out your bill. So that was a nice lesson learned, because it saved us a few $1,000s. What else? You know, the other thing that I learned with lighting and lighting control system is that you still need to have local control of the lighting for public areas like your classrooms and your offices, because the general public does not know how to operate a lighting control system, and they get really frustrated. So if they want to dim the lights, they just need to be able to go to the switch on the wall and do it. So we ended up adding those kind of at the last minute, like to override the lighting control system. And everything, all the water's low, ultra low flow. Our water utilization index is really low. I mean, like crazy low, like 94% below baseline. So I don't know why that is, but I mean, the bills don't lie, as far as I can tell.
Do you happen to have a cafe in the facility, or any restaurant type space?
Not in MuseumLab. We have a cafe in the main museum.
Okay.
So that, you know, that probably is the reason our WUI is so low, because most people would start their day at the main children's museum and finish their day at MuseumLab. So theoretically, they're eating and going to the bathroom at the other museum, and then not at MuseumLab.
Yeah, we have a couple, most of the museums have some sort of a restaurant or a cafe area, and we also have our first restaurant that joined the Cincinnati 2030 district. So, you know, those all have their own unique challenges and things. So we'll work with all of the Cincinnati 2030 district members to kind of talk through how we cohort and gather around those ideas. So,
yeah. Good. Oh, we got 2 more chats, huh? No, we're not using a cooling tower. Nope. Yeah, that's why the water's low. Yeah. So, probably, wow, we're right on time.
yeah. Well, great. Anybody have any last questions?
Yeah, I just, as the data analyst for the 2030 district, I was hoping I could appeal to you to say, maybe make some comments on some of the challenges that you feel museum type members might express at the onset of doing a commitment to the 2030 district. And I think clearly it's proven that for older buildings like museums, this is not only achievable, but there's a value in the tracking process. And I don't know if you have any anecdotes you could share about something, the value of measuring the data as being the catalyst to driving this rather remarkable change.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you study the data, you're going to start caring about the performance for sure. I think that, you know, that goes across the district. When we first sat down with GDA to establish the baseline, that was really interesting because museum baseline EUIs are pretty low. And I was very frustrated that, like, I think that for some reason, I think the museum baseline is like 66 or something, something really, it seemed like it was really low. So I kind of lobbied the Pittsburgh 2030 district to be realistic and evaluate the fact that I was renovating a historic building. So they did a custom baseline EUI based on the fact that it had been a library. And then they benchmarked it against, even though that was the baseline, and I think that's the zero tool baseline, they did benchmark us against other museums in Pittsburgh and across the country, as well as other historic buildings. I'll have to pull out that data, but I really wanted to see how we compared to that, because I felt like we should get a lot of credit for taking this 1890s building that was vacant and costing the city this ton of money and making it into something that was amazing. So, you know, it helped also that I had the old bills from the library, and so I could see what the improvement was going to be over what it had been. So even if you put aside the zero tool baseline, CBEX baseline, and you just look at the real life data, that convinced me, like, you know, okay, I'll put away this arbitrary EUI, but I can see that in 2016, before we started the renovation, your EUI was 156, and I'm going to get it down to 65. That's going to be good for my city. That's going to be good for my North Side neighborhood. And it's going to be good for the museum, because they're not going to have to pay that amount of money. So that was my anecdote, I guess. But, you know, for me, I'm all about, like, let's get an A. Like, I want to, you know, that's just my personality, is I want to score high. So by negotiating a high baseline EUI, made my numbers look good, so I was pretty happy about that. So that's what motivated me, for sure.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for anyone else that wants to, you know, Tom and I are available to all of you guys to talk to, whether you're a 2030 district member currently or not. We welcome your questions. And, you know, really the idea is, you know, once that data is shared, you can see where you are against baseline, and then you really start to be able to frame what are the next steps that you have to take to get to where you want to go. And so I really encourage everybody to connect with us and ask questions, share your data if you have not, and we'll help you through the process. Any last questions?
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Elizabeth, for inviting me. I was thrilled to get back into the building photographs and relive the memories, because it was a fun project.
Yeah, that's great. It
meant a lot. So,
beautiful project. You should be very proud of all the achievements, and we are just delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time to share this with us. I think we all benefited.
You're welcome.
From the progress you guys made. So, all right.
Great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.